Our next speaker is Jerry Meral. Gerald Meral, PhD, my notes say, was appointed Natural Resources Agency Deputy Secretary for the Bay Delta Conservation Plan on January 19, 2011. Dr. Meral will be charged with guiding completion of the BDCP to restore the Bay Delta ecosystem and create water supply reliability for California. In addition, he will be responsible for the development of any revenue and funding proposals necessary to complete the plan. Thank you for that in advance. Dr. Meral was Executive Director of the Planning and Conservation League from 1983 to 2003. He previously served as Deputy Director of the California Department of Water Resources under Governor Brown and Director of the Western Water Program of the Environmental Defense Fund. Dr. Merrill's PhD is in zoology from the University of California, Berkeley, and he received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Michigan. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Carl. BDCP, the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, as Phil said, is operating under the requirements of the legislature that it be dedicated to achieving the co-equal goals that he described, so I don't have to, and to use science to do so. Sounds easy, maybe not. What is BDCP? It's really a $250 million effort to get a permit. I suppose others here have spent more than that getting their permits, but that's what we're about. We're trying to get a permit to operate under the California Endangered Species Act through the Natural Communities Conservation Planning Program and Section 10 of the Federal Endangered Species Act. So we need permits from the Fish and Wildlife Service, from the National Marine Fisheries Service, and from the California Department of Fish and Game. So this is essentially a habitat conservation plan. There have been dozens of those, both under NCCP and under the HCP Act, so you'd think, well, all right, this is just one more. But there's never been one quite like this because it's heavily aquatic. Almost all of them are kind of terrestrial-based. This one is aquatic, and so it will require operating procedures that really no other NCCP or HCP has had, and so that's really the challenge in this particular program. We have to get, as Phil said, and there will be an appeal, so we will have to be approved ultimately by the Delta Stewardship Council. That's another step we have to go through. I think the most important part, and undoubtedly the most controversial part of our program, will be the adaptive management plan. Yes, on the ground, it's easy to imagine change conditions resulting in changes in the way you protect protected species, listed species on the ground. Happens more slowly, and you can respond to it, and adaptive management programs have worked fairly well in many cases. In the water, where you're dealing with species that perhaps spend only a few % of their entire life cycle within the project area, but a very critical few %, that is in terms of their migration, how do you adaptively manage those species when you start to see changes in them? I think that's the central challenge we have. Now, to make life a little bit more interesting and to not have to stop with just these few permits, we also need two other permits from our friends at the Corps of Engineers. One is the 404 permit under the Clean Water Act, and then the 408 permit. Probably not many of you have had to undergo a 408 permitting process, but that's when you're changing a flood control facility, essentially. And those permits are very challenging and can take a very long time, and we undoubtedly will be affecting flood control facilities if we propose to build any kind of project. So that's another step we have to go through. Finally, and Fran was very kind not to mention it, but if a facility is proposed at the end of this process, we also have to go to the State Water Board and ask for a change in place of diversion for the existing state and federal water projects. And that will be squarely in the middle of the process that Fran described in terms of updating the basin plan and revising the flow standards for the tributaries. So for those of you who want a long and fruitful career, just join us and we can guarantee you lots of action for many years to come. So we have a lot of regulations to go through. How is this thing being carried out? In fact, the BDCP is being funded by the state and federal water contractors. They are putting up gradually the roughly $250 million we need to carry out this plan. Now, that makes us popular when we do one of our periodic Washington trips and we show up and we say, we're not here to ask for money. So they welcome us with open arms at those meetings. But it also does create some interesting tensions between, of course, those who are trying to put the plan together and those who are paying for it, and I think that's often productive. We don't need legislation to complete the plan. The legislature really, I think, gave all the authority that it needed to in the package of legislation that Phil described, and that's great. We don't have to go back to them, but they're intensely interested. And for those of you who want to follow this in more detail, the Assembly Water Committee, Water Parks and Wildlife Committee, is having an oversight hearing, one of several they've had, I think on October 19th. Check their website and they can tell you. So I want to go to a few of the questions that were posed by the organizers of the conference, and also I want to end fairly quickly so that there is time for some questions. What is water supply reliability? Well, to environmentalists, understandably, water supply reliability has to be seen through the lens of species recovery. You can't have species recover and still take out as much water as anyone could possibly want from the ecosystem. So there has to be sort of a balance there. I guess that's the co-equal goals. Of course, from the water contractor's point of view, who are contemplating at least spending $12 or more billion of mostly ratepayer money, pretty much all ratepayer money, they want to have some certainty that this is a good investment. Now, you can think of a lot of reasons why it's a good investment, but they have to be able to explain to their ratepayers, this is a good way to spend your money, and $12 billion is going to cause some breathtaking rate hikes among their water agencies. So they want some reliability as well. What about recovery of listed species? You know, often people say, gee, the water exporters, you know, just really want to export water and they want to minimize their investment and not have to devote too much water to these species. And of course, that's in their fundamental best interest in some ways. But in their broader best interest is recovery of the species. Their water supplies have been tremendously impacted by the restrictions imposed by the biological agencies at the Delta pumps to protect all the species we're all so familiar with. Those restrictions will not be lifted under any conceivable plan that we can prepare in any significant way unless we can recover those species. So they are, in fact, even while we're preparing the plan, going out and investing tens of millions of dollars in recovery actions that they think will help promote these species, mostly in the Yolo bypass and actually elsewhere as well. And that's not just true of those who are involved in water contractors who export from the Delta. That's also true of those upstream who are spending a lot of money because they too are restricted by operations that are imposed by these biological agencies. So oddly enough, it's probably more in the interest of the water exporters to solve endangered species problems than even those who are dedicated to the protection of those species professionally, because it hits them in a way most visibly and hardest. How are we going to use science in this program? We have many science panels. We're convening another one right now to look at part of our effects analysis. We're going to have another one later on when we have the roll-up. We have a lot of science panels that are involved. We have many agency scientists who spend their careers on this. But naturally, scientists are famously reluctant to predict the results of the regulations of the habitat changes that are going to take place as part of the plan. That causes frustration among legislators, among the courts, among decision makers. They want some level of certainty. I'm sure everyone in this room knows that's not going to happen. We're not going to get that level of certainty. And so the investments that we have to make, billions and billions of dollars of habitat restoration investments, are a little bit uncertain in their outcome. We really don't know for sure whether they're going to work. It's just something we have to live with. We were criticized, I just say my predecessors were criticized by the National Academy of Science, justifiably because of the kind of definition of the program, the way we were using the effects analysis, which was very incomplete at the time. We are really trying to respond to those criticisms. A lot of them were justified, and we need to make sure we're responding to them. Finally, I'd like to ask those of you who are here, how many of you have had a chance to go out and look at the sort of Cache Slough, Liberty Island, Little Mandeville complex? How many people have actually been out there? So that's good. That's good. A lot of people, but a pretty small minority. It's easier to see what's going on in the bay in terms of restoration. Going down to the restored salt ponds and so on, you can really get out there, a quick drive and so on. It's harder to see it in the Delta, especially in areas that are mostly underwater, or at least periodically. I urge you to do that. This program is often thought of as, oh, we're going to just build some facility, whatever it is, and that's really all there is to it. This program, if it works, will probably be one of the largest, if not the largest, ecological restoration programs in the history of the United States. And pieces of it are happening gradually, especially in the North Delta, in that area that I talked to you about, Cache Slough. You just about have to rent a boat to go see it. Or if you have a friend in one of the agencies, they'll take you out there. But I urge you to do that because you'll see up there what is the potential for the Delta. You can see it a little easier when you drive Interstate 80 across the Yolo Bypass and see the Vic Fazio Refuge. You can see what restoration can look like there. But in the Delta, you really have to see it, and the potential to do more of that is gigantic. And I think for projects that many of us are very proud of, like Giacomini Wetlands or the Bay salt restoration, this project will possibly even dwarf some of those if we're able to carry it out successfully. And of course, that's the challenge, and naturally finding the means to pay for it. As I said, the water contractors are not only paying for the program we're doing right now, but they are dedicated to at least paying for any facilities that are built, mitigation for those facilities, and possibly restoration beyond that. There will have to be a public funding component. We can't ask the water exporters to completely pay for the changes that were created when the Delta was turned into farmland, when upstream water was diverted, climate changes, a lot of things that are causing problems, but we will have to find the funding to pay for the whole program. I'm going to stop there, but I'll be happy to take questions. And I want to say, much to his embarrassment, that Bill Harrell is here from the Department of Water Resources, one of our best program managers in this program, and if you see his name tag, feel free to ask him almost anything. Thank you.